A desk lamp cast a soft glow on John Vojtovich's massive desk, illuminating papers covered with diagrams, drawings, and notes. Everything about the Medium project, the biocomputer they had worked on so carefully, taking into account all the possibilities, lay before him like the last frontier before the battle. The situation became more than clear. The CIA was already preparing to seize his project, which means that the Medium was in serious danger. Vojtovich understood that he did not have any sanctions for the destruction of the biocomputer, and the US government would never approve such a step. Medium was considered a national treasure, a technology that surpassed imagination and brought them closer to contact with another mind firsthand. But John knew that once the Medium fell into the hands of the CIA, everything they built would become a weapon beyond his personal control. And behind all that was done were billions of dollars in injections, science, and technology. In the end, the CIA will simply scrap Vojtovich with honors at the memorial cemetery. He called Steve Summers into his office. Steve, with a serious expression on his face, entered, closed the door tightly behind him, and sat down opposite the boss, glancing briefly at the table filled with documents.
Did you call? What is it about?
Vojtovich was silent for a few moments, drumming his fingers tensely on the table. He knew that talking to Steve would be difficult, but there was no other way. "Steve," he finally began, his voice heavy and determined. "We will destroy the Medium, completely. It's the only way to keep the CIA from getting to him." Summers froze, peering into Vojtovich's face as if trying to catch a hint of a joke. But Vojtovich was serious. "You do realize that this is crazy, right?" Steve finally said, raising his eyebrows a little. "The government won't give you carte blanche to destroy the project. This is the height of absurdity, John. You know that very well yourself." "Maybe," John replied coldly, looking straight into Steve's eyes. "But we don't have a choice. Either we destroy the project or the CIA will take it away, and then the Medium will become a weapon of mass control for them. They're going to take over our technology and use it for their own purposes. And I won't allow that." Steve pursed his lips, thinking about what he had said. He always knew that Vojtovich was a man of principles and was not used to backing down. But this decision was something special, too radical even for him. "John, but if we destroy the Medium, we will simply cancel all the work of the department. Do you think the government will just ignore this?" Vojtovich smiled grimly, as if he no longer cared what the government thought when it found out. He got up, went to the window, and thought for a moment, looking at the night city. "Steve, understand it's not just about our work. The whole project, every damn component of the Medium, is not just a machine. This is access to the mind, to control over consciousness. Once the CIA takes this into their own hands, they will change all of us. There won't be any more people left. It's just going to be a car driving a car." Steve was lost in thought again. He understood. They have not just a development on their hands, but something that can change the very nature of man. Their biocomputer was a revolution, but now the revolution has turned into a weapon. "And what are you going to do?" Steve asked, finally looking up. "You don't think you can just take out and destroy the project alone, do you?" John leaned back in his chair and exhaled heavily. "I have already contacted our contacts in China. I sent a request to organize an attack through the branch. We will need the help of hackers. Hundreds of hackers working at the same time. We will launch an attack on the Medium and block all its systems." Steve even whistled. He knew that Vojtovich could take drastic measures, but a massive cyber attack involving Chinese specialists? It was like something grand and dangerous. "John, do you understand what you're saying now?" His voice was full of concern. "Do you want to cause an international scandal? Go against the CIA with the help of Chinese hackers? It's suicide, but it's more like treason." Vojtovich shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe so, but if this is the price for leaving the entire project and the fate of our department safe, then so be it. Are you ready for this, Steve? We will destroy him, and perhaps a tribunal awaits us both, with a known outcome." Steve was silent for a long time. He knew that Vojtovich had a difficult character, that for him the mission was always more important than personal safety. But now their lives and the future of the entire department were at stake. However, Steve knew that there was no other way out. If they don't do anything, the CIA will take over the project, and then a completely different war will begin. A war for the control of people's minds. "Okay, John," he said slowly. "If you're sure this is the only way, I'm with you. But understand, it's going to be risky, and we need to prepare properly." The next few hours were spent planning. Wojtowicz, Steve, and their team carefully thought through every step. A key part of the plan was a hacker attack. Chinese specialists had to gain access to the internal systems of the biocomputer and disrupt its operation. They gathered all the necessary data about the protective mechanisms of the medium, identified its weaknesses, and built tactics. At night, Wojtowicz established an encrypted communication channel with a representative of the Chinese group known by the code name Poppy Lotus. In the dim light of the monitor, he was talking to a man he had never seen, but whom he trusted on an intuitive level. Poppy Lotus explained that he had gathered the best hackers from a network of anonymous experts. They all understood that this was an unusual task that required special precision. Someone was practicing algorithms in the dark. "We'll start with the simplest viruses that will check how your protection system works," explained the Poppy Lotus. "After that, we will launch a massive attack to neutralize the reaction of the biocomputer and disable its self-protective protocols." Wojtowicz listened attentively, writing down the details of the plan. "How long will it take?" "What is it?" he asked, realizing that they would not get a second chance. "Besides, you understand that we need all the information accumulated by the biocomputer in a single medium, and these are terabytes of information, if not more. If everything goes according to plan, no more than 6 hours. But there is one if," the Poppy Lotus warned. "If your biocomputer has self-learning mechanisms, this may be a problem. He can adapt to our viruses, and then we will have to come up with new ways of attacking." Wojtowicz knew that Medium was built as a self-learning system, capable of recovering from an attack. But in this case, he had an additional plan: simultaneous physical destruction of the biocomputer. Late at night, when Steve walked into Wojtowicz's office, he was sitting with a test tube in his hand. It contained a colorless solution that they had developed as an emergency measure to erase data, a special neuroparalyzer that destroys any biological structure. He could instantly damage the remodeling circuits on which the work of the medium was based. "What is it?" Steve asked, pausing at the door, his voice full of apprehension. "This is the last step. A neuroparalyzer," John replied, holding the test tube up to the light. "If the hackers fail or the system starts to recover, we will insert it into the biocomputer. He will cut the chains, and then there will be nothing left." Steve came closer, realizing that this was more serious than he thought. He looked at his boss with concern, seeing that he was ready to do anything for the sake of the goal. "Are you really going to go all the way?" "What is it?" he asked, not hiding his anxiety. Wojtowicz smiled wearily, closing his eyes for a second. "Yeah. If it gives us a chance to keep the project out of the hands of the CIA, yes, Steve. I will go. It's not a matter of choice. This is our duty." They exchanged tense glances, realizing that they would not be able to go back. The cold night air was creeping through the cracks of the window opening when Wojtowicz returned to his office. Behind him, the door lock clicked softly, isolating him and Steve from the rest of the world. Everything in their operation depended on one goal: to break the biocomputer system to the ground, leaving the CIA no chance of restoring it. Wojtowicz's decision to turn to the Chinese hacker network was desperate, but the only right one, and tonight they had to make final arrangements. The path to Chinese specialists was built through complex communication networks. Encrypted channels, direct and false, went through dozens of points to hide the target, but the end always pointed to one person. The one Wojtowicz was going to talk to was known in the dark networks by the code name Shadow of Bagua. It was said that his team was the best on the entire eastern side of cyberspace and could bring down even secure government networks in a matter of hours. Today, the Shadow of Bagua and his hacker group were supposed to be the decisive force that would destroy the medium. The light from a dim desk lamp picked out the outlines of the screen, and Wojtowicz, sitting at the table, intently watched the communication line, which finally flickered green. A simple image resembling a Chinese character appeared on the screen, and after a few seconds, a quiet, broken voice with a slight accent filled the speakers. Vojitovich, in touch. We are ready. All the preparatory stages have been completed, a voice rang out, soft but full of firm confidence. You can be sure that we have assembled the best team for this task. Vojitovich nodded, catching his breath. He knew that the only chance to destroy the medium was a coordinated, fast, and error-free attack. The biocomputer system was protected by numerous protocols that could adapt to threats on their own. If something goes wrong, their entire operation will fail, and the CIA, having obtained their development, will deprive people of the right to freedom. Thank you for your support, Vojitovich said with restraint. It is important that the system does not have a single chance to recover. Will you be able to act smoothly enough? We have already tested all the vulnerabilities in the laboratory, replied Shadow Bagua. Your device is self-learning, but we know how to suppress its reaction. We have allocated separate commands for each stage of the attack. One for hacking, the other for suppressing recovery. It's like a war on 1,000 fronts, but we can win it. Steve was sitting next to Vojitovich, listening intently to the dialogue. His mind was preoccupied with everything they had to do and the inner fear that the plan might get out of control. When Shadow Bagua finished, Steve gestured to Vojitovich that he would like to ask a question. Let me get this straight, Lotus, Steve said, looking at the screen. What happens if the biocomputer starts intercepting viruses? The system can rewrite malicious code, adapting to the attack. There was silence for a second, and Steve had already decided that he would not receive an answer, but then Lotus calmly said, We foresaw this possibility. We have a backup group of 50 people who will change viruses in real time, reacting to every step of the biocomputer. Trust me, we will have no other outcome but success. Vojtovich's normally impassive face brightened for a moment. He had not felt so confident for a long time, as if their fate was not in his hands, but in the hands of people who understood and shared his goals. I'm glad to hear that, Lotus, Vojtovich said, his voice low but determined. You and your team will receive full access privileges as soon as we launch the initial phase of the attack. But keep in mind, if they want to restore the system, they won't waste time on ceremonies. The full power of the CIA will be against us. If anything happens, you will be removed. Vojtovich, we are used to dealing with opponents of the highest level. You wouldn't stand on ceremony either, Lotus Shadow's voice rang out, and there was a slight sneer in it. Your fears are not unfounded, but I assure you, the CIA will not get its way. We work quickly and leave a minimum of traces. By morning, everything will be over, and the biocomputer will become just a myth. Steve, who was sitting next to him, looked at Vojtovich, and there was anxiety in his gaze. John, but then what? We are committing an international crime here? An attack on a strategic facility. As soon as the CIA finds traces of hacking, they will start looking for the culprits, and they will not stop until they find us. Vojtovich shrugged slightly. You're right, Steve. A group of unknown hackers from China will be blamed for everything. We will expose them with a gasket. The beginning of the attack. A couple of hours later, when all the systems had been tested and the Lotus team had lined up their positions, Vojtovich sent Shadow Bagua an access code that opened a channel to the basic structure of the biocomputer. This code was created by him personally and gave access to the central operating system of the medium, allowing hackers to penetrate every level of its protection. We start at Oro 300 in exactly 15 minutes, Lotus's voice rang out. We will launch the first virus package. The signal is coming in real time, so your systems will start recording the attack in a few seconds. Great, Vojtovich nodded. Steve swiped at the control panel, and streams of data began to line up on the screens around them, indicating the process of the attack. Red and blue lines were flashing, indicating how the biocomputer system was trying to resist. The Lotus Shadow team began to strike the first blow. The chaos of viruses flooded the central server, and the protection began to weaken. A minute later, Vojtovich saw how the biocomputer system began to generate recovery codes, but Shadow Bagua and his team quickly adjusted. The hacker's words turned out to be true. As soon as the biocomputer attempted to recover, the Chinese group instantly sent a new virus code, suppressing the reaction. Every second was critically important. If the system resisted too much, the CIA might notice the hack and try to intercept it. But the team worked as a single organism. Their viruses were rewritten on the fly, blocking self-healing modules. Steve stared at the indicators on the screen, feeling the tension in every nerve. John, I hope you know what you're doing. These guys are professionals, but if the CIA runs its firewall into a single server, we won't be able to do anything, he whispered, trying not to distract the commander. Wojtowicz nodded, understanding the responsibility. If something goes wrong, we have one last move. He glanced at the neuroparalyzer syringe standing next to him. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Green indicators began to light up on the screens. The biocomputer system was gradually being suppressed. Each virus packet destroyed another barrier, and now hackers have gained access to central databases. They were uploading thousands of lines of code that was supposed to destroy everything once and for all. But suddenly an alarming message appeared on the screen. Recovery attempt. The biocomputer activated its self-defense systems for the last time, trying to discard viruses. Shadow Bagua. The system has activated backup protection, Wojtowicz said quickly, relaying the signal to the hackers. We foresaw this, the Shadow replied calmly. Relax, Wojtowicz. Now will be our final move. Steve and Wojtowicz held their breath. The monitors flashed with alarming flashes, as if the medium was fighting for his life himself, trying to resist the onslaught of viruses. The algorithms of the biocomputer were rapidly being rebuilt, protecting themselves from intrusion. On the screens in front of Wojtowicz, columns of code were lined up, changing in real time, while the system, designed to communicate with unknown minds, turned into a reasonable enemy defending itself with frightening fury. Steve watched as if mesmerized. Streams of data were hitting backhand, alternating one after another, like explosions of light and fire. He's fighting, Steve breathed, feeling a chill down his spine. John, we are witnessing the birth of more than just self-defense. This biocomputer is fighting for life. The medium began to come to life before their eyes. Every hacker attack, every virus code aimed at destroying his system, was blocked while the neural circuits of the biocomputer were rebuilt into a single defense mechanism. The system was strenuously generating recovery codes, desperately trying to regain control of its database. Shadow, urgently increase the intensity of the attack, Wojtowicz said into his earpiece. We're losing the advantage. Copy that, Wojtowicz, the hacker's tense voice rang out. But the more resistance there is, the more people I need to attack. The biocomputer has started using advanced self-defense algorithms. This is no longer an ordinary hack. Wojtowicz, barely breathing, watched as the system created by his department turned into a closed mind, protecting its data like a living being. Red and blue symbols appeared on the screen one after another, indicating failed attacks, blocked viruses, and restarted protection algorithms. Suddenly, loud static was heard in Wojtowicz's earpiece, and Shadow Bagua said anxiously, The biocomputer has raised the protective barriers of the second level. It looks like he's isolating part of the system to block our access. Steve clenched his teeth, his gaze darting between the monitors. He knew that if the medium could reach the third level of protection, then their attack could fail. And then the CIA would restore the biocomputer. There was less and less time left. Then let's make the final attack, Wojtowicz said decisively, looking at the ampule with the neuroparalyzer. He's trying to protect his memory now. We introduce the substance. We must make sure that the biocomputer cannot predict this. Steve nodded and slowly entered the activation code for the toxin supply. Thin tubes embedded in the network of the biocomputer began to supply a neuroparalyzer, which was supposed to destroy the main blocks of its processing. The system was created on the basis of artificial neural circuits, and when exposed to the substance, it was supposed to begin to disintegrate. On Wojtowicz's screen, the biocomputer got agitated. A series of lines darted to the sides, as if the machine began to feel that it was being attacked not only from the outside but also from the inside. The code was frantically rewritten, flashing red. The system was trying with all its might to suppress the toxin. The fight began, and the deadly substance invaded the system. Damn it, he's fighting! John, he's changing the configuration! Steve shouted, watching as the data streams began to break and then reconnect, as if adjusting to the effects of the toxin. Suddenly, one of the monitors went off, then the other. The biocomputer system, losing control over parts of the network, began to direct energy flows to maintain the main circuits. It was like the screams of a machine that didn't want to die. Security protocols were being activated at breakneck speed, and some of them even tried to cut off the electricity in the building to block the supply of the toxin. Wojtowicz and Steve, surrounded by flashing screens, realized that the biocomputer was trying to sabotage their actions. There was a crash in the next room. Screams were heard from there. One of the employees in charge of energy distribution and data flows ran out into the hallway, his face covered in sweat and fear.
The biocomputer has started producing feedback signals. We are losing control of the equipment. The laboratory is unstable.
Wojtowicz gritted his teeth, heading to the monitor where the laboratory's security systems were displayed. On the screen, he saw how the network of the biocomputer, as if alive, sent signals to turn on and off the voltage, which led to short circuits.
Lotus, we need the final blow. He's starting to affect our own systems,
Wojtowicz shouted into the microphone, realizing that there was almost no time left to fight. Shadow Bagua replied with tension in his voice. There will be an increased attack now. Wojtowicz, hold on. We will have to accelerate the power to the maximum. Additional indicators appeared on Wojtowicz and Steve's monitors, and before their eyes the biocomputer began to cover the network with a new layer of viruses. However, despite the impact, the medium was developing additional security codes, strengthening the backup circuits. It was like a desperate opponent, cornered, throwing his last strength at survival. Steve saw colleagues in neighboring rooms trying to stabilize the equipment, but each new pulse coming from the center of the biocomputer disrupted stability. People were screaming, someone was grabbing the equipment, trying to keep it from short circuits.
John, the biocomputer has really started to resist. He's generating electrical impulses through his channels,
said Steve, turning to Wojtowicz.
The system can overload to death everyone who works here.
Wojtowicz squinted at the last active monitor. His voice sounded firm and hoarse. We will destroy it. Another launch. In response, Shadow Bagua, through a calm but tense understood, and activated the next layer of attack. The supply of viruses increased significantly, heading directly to the control center of the biocomputer. The protective chains began to break down, and it seemed that they were about to win. But then Wojtowicz saw one of the employees standing at the terminal, grab his head, scream, and collapse to the floor. His body was cramped. The next moment, several more people in the hall began to feel unbearable pain.
John, what's going on?
Steve shouted, watching the staff fall to the floor like defeated soldiers, choking on screams. The biocomputer began to release radio signals aimed directly at the nerve endings. He's attacking their brains, whispered Wojtowicz, realizing the horror of what was happening. In front of his eyes, the biocomputer, like a beast that has come to its senses, began to generate strong impulses directed towards the human brain. People around fainted from headaches. Bloody tears appeared on their faces. The medium tried to kill everyone who posed a threat to him. Steve, clutching his head, felt an unbearable pain rush into his brain. He felt like his head was going to explode. He instinctively leaned away, his vision began to blur, and eerie shadows danced before his eyes.
John, he's going to destroy us,
Steve whispered, trying to stay on his feet. Wojtowicz, gritting his teeth, did not take his eyes off the screen. He knew that if they didn't finish the attack now, destroy the biocomputer, then he would survive and send their own data to the CIA.
Shadow, the last blow,
Wojtowicz shouted, seeing how the biocomputer system was starting to lose control. A second later, the last wave of viruses flooded into the network of the biocomputer, and at that moment he finally gave up. The monitors went out, the ominous pulses stopped, and silence covered the entire building. The extinguished monitors left Wojtowicz's room in an alarming silence. Blinded by the flickering and pain, the employees of the Special Development Department, whose bodies were bending under the waves of biocomputer impulses a minute ago, began to come to their senses. Someone was looking around dazedly, someone was trying to get up, clinging to tables and terminals, and someone was just lying. covered by the ragged shadows of the broken circuits of the biocomputer. Steve sat down on the floor, breathing heavily, with his back against the wall. His eyes were red and his face was covered with perspiration, but he still managed to look up at Wojtowicz. "Did we destroy it?" he croaked, getting to his feet through pain and effort. Wojtowicz looked at the darkening screen, where a minute ago there was a battle between hacker viruses and the stubborn but doomed system of the medium. He wanted to answer, but noticed a red light flashing on the side of the screen, a reminder of the completion of the last level of protection. The biocomputer, as if realizing its fate, turned on a disaster recovery program that was supposed to resuscitate its systems. "He's still trying to recover," Wojtowicz breathed wearily. "Damn creature. It looks like the stunner didn't completely destroy the neural circuits." The shadow of Bagua, who reappeared on their connection, immediately caught the alarm in Wojtowicz's voice. "We've done our best, Wojtowicz, but the system is still struggling. Its backup modules are located on hidden circuits. It looks like they could have been built into the building at the design stage." "Are you saying that the biocomputer has hidden sources of recovery?" Steve asked, barely able to contain his irritation. "Exactly," Lotus replied with a noticeable cold detachment. "This is not just a system, but a hybrid network. She will recover from any available reserves, as long as she has enough power and data." Steve's head dropped, and Wojtowicz felt the same chilling horror as before. The medium did not just survive the attack, it was as if he sought to repel it, forcing his creators to see his new autonomous power. It was created not just as a computer, but as a smart connection that can exist independently of external commands. "Then listen to me carefully," Wojtowicz's voice sounded uncompromising. "We can't let him recover. We assemble a team and physically destroy all its key modules. We have to see this through to the end." While Shadow Bagua was developing a new plan to contain the reserves of the biocomputer, Wojtowicz and his team, despite their weakness after the attack, were preparing for the decisive step, the physical destruction of the medium's circuits. Several operators straightened up with difficulty, wiping blood from their noses, and rushed to the laboratory where the neural modules of the biocomputer were located. Thin wires and cables connected them to the building, like the ingrown roots of a huge living organism. Seizing axes and hooks from fireboxes, the staff began methodically destroying the equipment. Steve, taking a fire extinguisher, literally began to burn out the power supply nodes until the mechanisms that were once responsible for tissue remodeling died down. Powerful blows on the chains of the medium bounced around the room with a dull echo. The electricity was turned off to stop any restart processes. Wojtowicz watched helplessly as the employees one by one destroyed the last elements of the medium, but on his face was not joy, but despair. Every hammer blow, every severed wire meant the end of their joint work. "This was supposed to be a breakthrough for all of humanity," Steve said, lowering the axe and looking at the pieces of equipment that were lying under his feet. "And now, we're turning this into ashes." Wojtowicz closed his eyes, feeling all the tension of the last few days hit him at once. But the decision was made. Finally and irrevocably. It was the only chance to protect the medium from the CIA and prevent it from being turned into a machine for subjugating human will. However, a moment later, their plan took an unexpected risk. Shadow Bagua got in touch with the warning. "Wojtowicz, bad news. While we were hitting the recovery systems, the CIA noticed our tracks. They activated their counteraction department and sent a message through their internal channels." "What does this mean?" Steve clenched his fists, anticipating the worst. "The CIA is preparing a team to take over control, or at least stop the destruction process while they have a chance. They can get to you at any minute." Wojtowicz, instantly realizing the seriousness of the situation, ordered the staff to speed up their work. Now they had only a few minutes to destroy the remaining elements of the medium and prevent the CIA from interfering. Everyone who was still on their feet began to smash the equipment, flooding it with chemicals, tearing out wires, destroying communication circuits. They fought with technology as with an enemy on the battlefield, with blows, rumbles, and the sound of falling parts. Vojtovich and Steve, without stopping fighting, directed employees to block all networks. The laboratory became a battle zone where every wire, every chip or panel meant new barriers for the medium to be destroyed. But the last risk remained. They did not know what else the biocomputer was hiding, what it was capable of. And this was their last challenge. One of the employees connected to the control module tried to launch the final reset program, but the medium issued a new stream of signals that poured from the inside directly into the building's network. The sense of danger increased. Vojtovich, looking at the lights on the screen, realized that the biocomputer was not giving up. The huge screens began to flicker again, as if the biocomputer, mad with rage, was sending out the last waves of resistance. Suddenly, one of the employees screamed, clutching his head, and then fell to the floor, convulsing. The medium was trying to knock them out using the last backup signals. "Let's get out of the lab! Urgent!" Vojtovich shouted, grabbing Steve's arm. "We have to turn off the power to the whole building at once!" They ran out into the hallway where they could already hear the sounds of falling furniture and the clang of equipment being turned off. People ran out, knocking down everything in their path when the system froze for a moment. But then the biocomputer began to overload, as if preparing to release the last pulse. There's almost no time left. The Shadow of Bagua, realizing that they might be trapped to death, issued a final order on the air. "Retreat. Vojtovich, go away. I am submitting the final virus to overload the systems. In 60 seconds, everything will explode." Steve and Vojtovich rushed to the exit, almost knocking down the staff, and managed to get out of the laboratory at the last moment. A dull explosion was heard behind them as the system, having received an overload, began to collapse from the inside. Her circuits exploded, and warmth washed over them at the exit as the last, desperate pulse of the biocomputer rang out. The molten remains of the laboratory were still smoking in the night. Black clouds of smoke rose from the ruins, and Vojtovich and Steve stood panting on the roof of the servo factory building, and watched as the destroyed biocomputer finally dissolved into flames. The building that was once the heart of their project has turned into a giant, blackened skeleton. But they knew it wasn't over yet. The cell phone in Vojtovich's pocket suddenly vibrated, pulling him out of his gloomy contemplation. He slowly took it out, realizing that the call was most likely the beginning of a response. The number was not determined, only the word unknown was on the screen. Steve, noticing the anxious expression on Vojtovich's face, nodded curtly, turning pale. They both knew it could have been a call from the CIA. "Vojtovich is in touch," he said without losing his composure. A cold, emotionless voice came from the speaker. "John, congratulations on a successful operation. You managed to win the battle, but you're going to lose the war." Vojtovich did not expect to hear this voice. It was the deputy head of the CIA's project department, a man who always remained in the shadows and appeared only in moments of crisis. This voice, distorted by electronic interference, was filled with an indifferent, almost frightening calmness. "You destroyed the medium," the voice continued, "but your audacity is costing you a lot more than you think. We already know about your contacts with the Shadow of Bagua and his narrow-eyed sixes. Supporting foreign intelligence in a subversive operation is treason." Steve stared at Vojtovich, stunned. But Vojtovich, on the contrary, only tightened his grip on the phone. "I did it because I saw that you wanted to use a biocomputer to control people's minds," he replied calmly. "You want us to become puppets of your power. And while I'm at the helm, you won't get that chance." There was a short laugh, and the voice continued. "John, you underestimate us. Do you think you can hide the destruction of a national site? The CIA will get proof of your betrayal no matter how many labs you destroy. The medium is only part of what we are planning. We are already working on the next stage." Vojtovich realized that his efforts would not stop the CIA. The words of the interlocutor meant that they had already prepared a backup plan, an alternative to the medium. And now, after his actions, they would leave him no choice. "Do you think you can seize all our projects and have me court-martialed?" "What is it?" he asked, hearing his own echo in the emptiness of the night. "You're too confident in your power." "We've already struck back, John, and soon it won't be just you who will feel it. The voice became dangerously quiet. You've lost carte blanche for UFO project management. But don't worry. You'll soon feel for yourself what it means to resist the system. The beeps cut off the conversation, leaving Wojtowicz in anxious silence. He felt a chill spreading through his body. It wasn't a simple threat. It was the beginning of the end. The authorities have already begun to look for those responsible, and the news of the hacker attack got into classified reports. Meanwhile, a barrage of covert pressure descended on Wojtowicz. He began to receive summonses for interrogations, document checks, and personnel purges began in the department. Several people who supported his decisions disappeared from the state overnight. The next day, Steve showed up at his office, locking the door and throwing a couple of subpoenas on the table. "This is just the beginning, John," he said, rubbing his temples wearily. "They will decide to destroy us. I do not know what's next. You do realize that we could just be eliminated, right?" Wojtowicz looked at Steve, feeling the uncertainty in his partner's eyes for the first time. Steve was with him to the end, but now that the system had begun its pressure, he didn't know if they could stand it. "I knew I was taking a risk," Wojtowicz replied. Steve nodded, but his gaze remained intense. "Yes, John, I understand, but now everything is hanging by a thread. The authorities have already begun to suspect us of international relations and undermining security. Perhaps you've lost your last trust." Wojtowicz nodded silently, realizing that their department could now become a target. They might already be doomed, but he knew one thing: if he had chosen a different path, he would have betrayed himself.